makes you think I'm gonna make a deal with you? This doesn't end well.
For you.
The newest episode of Fear the Walking Dead just aired a little bit early on AMC Plus, and I just watched it, and I'm going to give you guys my first impressions to it, my first reaction, my first thoughts. With only 3 episodes of Fear the Walking Dead left, my expectations are so high, even though I feel like they shouldn't be, and because of that, I'm left with a lot of mixed feelings at the end of this episode, like I've had at the end of pretty much every episode this season. I'm going to talk about the episode, I'm going to give you my pros, my cons, my overall thoughts on this episode, but before I do, consider subscribing. I talk about the Walking Dead universe all the time. I talk about every single episode as it airs, but I also talk about other TV shows, talk about movies, I do trailer reactions, and I talk about video games. And this week, The Walking Dead Destinies comes out, and I'm really excited for that for some reason that I can't really explain to you. Anyway, let's talk about this episode of Fear the Walking Dead. The main plot that we get here centers around Victor Strand and him kidnapping Troy's daughter and trying to use her as leverage against Troy, and how the other characters react to that. Mainly June, Luciana, and Madison, and they all have different opinions on how they should handle the situation. But as the episode progresses, the majority of this episode centers around Victor, obviously, Madison, and Daniel Salazar. And I really liked that because it was the OG Fear the Walking Dead characters, all characters that were introduced and in the very first season of Fear the Walking Dead. And one thing that I really like about this final season of Fear the Walking Dead is how it's just coming full circle, how the main characters that we've known from the beginning of the show are getting the vast majority of the attention. But I'm going to talk about my pros first, that being the first pro that I have. The second pro that I have is something I've said a lot already in pretty much every review of this second half of this season, but I really enjoy the callbacks and the references to early seasons of Fear the Walking Dead, the Dave Erickson era of Fear the Walking Dead. And we get a lot more of those callbacks here. We get more references to the ranch. We get more of just the characters telling us, reminding us of what happened. We even get a reference of Ophelia poisoning the ranch. We get a reference of how she died. And that was one thing that was so great about the writing of season 3 and Ophelia's character overall, is how she poisoned a bunch of people, but she was lied to, and how she died being essentially a hero trying to protect people. And I just really enjoy that the final half of this season is acknowledging the early seasons of Fear the Walking Dead. Yes, sometimes it feels cheap. Sometimes it feels forced. Sometimes it just feels like the current writers don't really know how to give us any payoff of their own, any emotion of their own, so they resort back to just reminding us of stuff that we cared about before they even came around. It kind of feels that way with them just bringing back Madison and Troy in the first place, but at the end of the day, I prefer this. I would rather them do this, even if it feels a little bit cheap, as opposed to them trying to create their own climax and their own character arcs and just failing at it. Another pro that I have about this episode is I'm personally giving in to the suspense, to the tension, to the buildup of whatever this is leading up to. I'm so curious about who Tracy's mother is. Who is the mother of Troy's daughter that Madison allegedly caused the death of? I initially thought that maybe it was a character that Madison killed between season 3 and season 4, and then I started to think that it was probably someone Madison killed while she was a collector for Padre, and maybe she once tried to kidnap Tracy. But now we're learning that what caused Tracy's mother's death is Madison's mantra of no one's gone until they're gone. And I just don't really know how that's going to happen. I'm sure it's not going to be satisfying, whatever the answer is, but I'm still curious. I'm also giving in to the suspense of, is Alicia alive? Are we going to find her corpse? Are we going to find her as a walker? Is Madison going to get that closure? Or are we going to find her alive? Or are we even going to get an answer at all? And there's no way that all of this is going to conclude in a satisfying way in the 2 remaining episodes that we have. So it's either going to end in a very rushed and unsatisfying way, which is probably going to be the case. Or maybe everything that they're building up to is going to lead into a different spin-off with a different showrunner and a different writer, and maybe what comes next can just justify the existence of what we're getting now. Which I personally hope that's the case. I hope Troy lives past this season because he's my favorite villain in the whole Walking Dead universe. And characters like Alicia and Strand and Madison, they have so much more potential than what they're being given here. Like, I know this isn't gonna happen in a million years, I know that, but can you imagine if this show ended with Madison, Troy, Strand, Daniel maybe even Luciana, maybe even Alicia returning, and then they announce a spin-off by Dave Erickson, and he actually returns to fulfill his original vision in some way. Obviously, that wouldn't happen in a million years, but one can hope. And now I'm going to talk about the cons that I have for this episode. Not enough Troy. I was really excited for him to return, and he had a really intense standoff, in my opinion, with Luciana, and it felt like it was building to something, and it did build to a battle, but we didn't get to see that battle, and that's so unfortunate to me. But Luciana does mention that Troy lost most of his men, and I'm actually excited for that because it means that whatever climax that we get isn't just going to be army versus army. It's going to be a lot more intense. It's going to be a lot more personal. It's going to be just a few characters, you know, dealing with their personal beef, which I would prefer. And also we get a few new characters introduced. They're basically an Alicia fan club, and it's just so stupid to me. Like, it's just so unbelievable. Like, I know they want to carry out Alicia's legacy in some way, but they can just do it the way that they're doing it now. Just have Victor trying to fulfill Alicia's final wish. Just have the characters that we know and appreciate and love already respecting Alicia's legacy. They don't need to introduce these new characters that just seem so stupid. And it makes no sense because they said that they met Alicia shortly after the events of season 7, and that was 7 years ago, and they said clearly that Alicia helped them and then moved on, but yet 7 years later they're acting like they're some of the people that knew Alicia the best. I just don't like it. I don't care for it. There's no more room for characters like this. With only 2 episodes left, they just need to hyper focus on the character arcs of the characters we have. Anyway, there's my brief and quick thoughts on the newest episode of Fear the Walking Dead. What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments, and yeah. Thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.